He's got to bounce back from the triple header troubles that he's had immediately in Miami.
This is going to be the start of the redemption arc for Lando, I think.
It's going to get tasty between the McLaren guys. It has to.
Max is always in the title fight. I think actually he's quite enjoying being the hunter rather than hunted for once.
It's not going to be Max and George in the same team, is it?
Why do you say that?
Kimi has to perform okay, but I think he is the nice second driver.
But come next year, won't be a rookie anymore, he might be a very different type of teammate.
Amid the difficulties, Leclerc's reputation is growing as a result, I think.
If he got that 2022 chance again, I think he would be a much more formidable challenger as well.
Just seen a slightly different Alex this year. A bit more feisty, a bit more rascal.
5 races down and just 12 points between the top 3 drivers. What a start to the season we've had, and what a title race we've got on our hands. And with Miami hosting the second F1 sprint of the year, there are plenty of points up for grabs this coming weekend. Welcome everyone to F1 Nation's preview of the Miami Grand Prix. I'm Tom Clarkson, and joining me on the show this week are Sky Sports F1 presenter Natalie Pinkham and F1 TV commentator and former Renault driver Jolyon Palmer. Guys, it's great to have you both on the show. What a season it's turning into, just 12 points separating the top 3. What do you make of it, Jolyon?
Yeah, it's been great, hasn't it? I mean, it started off with an absolute cracker in Melbourne, which sort of set the scene. And then there's just been nice narratives through all the weekends. We've got the rise of Oscar, taking 3 wins. He seems pretty unflappable, but you've got Max still there hanging in. Been really impressed with George Russell as well. And then Lando, we've established 4 contenders early doors, and the racing's been, let's be honest, it's been a bit hit and miss. But the stories are there after 5 races, which is exciting.
And the big story for me is that a lot of it has been won on quali day. Whoever's put it on pole tends to then convert it into a win. But I agree with JP. I love the different strands to this. And I love the different offerings the 5 races so far have given us. Very different challenges. And we've seen different drivers rise to each one.
It's been simmering away, hasn't it? I thought Japan summed it up beautifully, where we had the top 3 drivers just all within range, but no one able to get off a shot. And in a funny kind of way, it was the same last weekend in Saudi, wasn't it? Look, we'll talk all things Miami later in the show. Let's talk in a little bit more depth now about the season so far. Oscar Piastri leads the World Championship for the first time in his Formula One career, becoming the first Aussie since 2010, since his manager Mark Webber was leading it back in 2010. Oscar's won 3 of the opening 5 races. McLaren teammate Lando Norris and Red Bull's Max Verstappen are champing at his heels. Let's look at McLaren first of all. Let's get our tame racing drivers' thoughts on Oscar. Where has he got it so right this year?
Well, 2 things. Firstly, qualifying, which has been the deal breaker. As you say, Pinks, qualifying is where the races have been won, really. And that's where Oscar's been able to do a great job so far. So last year he was 20-4 down, and he's managed to turn that around this year. So I think qualifying, he's got it nailed. And I think in the same bracket there, you could put Lando's struggles really in qualifying, and it's, one and the other go hand in hand. But I like his mentality. We kind of saw it a bit last year, some of the racing that he put in Monza, in Baku, where he got the win or got the second in Monza. But he's just so chill, isn't he? He's so ruthless, calm, calculated. But this is the heat of a championship battle he's starting in. If he's got the 1-lap pace, he's also got the mentality to execute on race day, and that's what we've seen so far.
Now, I know the global spotlight isn't on him in the same way, Jolyon, but how much will he have benefited from winning previous series in the first time of being asked?
Well, I like that he's obviously got a winner's mentality. So coming through F3 and F2, to win in those series is incredibly tough. The competition is fierce. There's so many things that can go wrong for your championship when you're putting it together in the junior formula. But to come through and win them first time, it shows he's got a killer instinct. And we've seen it before already. He knows how to win championships. It is, like you say, is going to be completely different in Formula One. And already I think you can see the pressure that Lando's facing and how that can affect you. And maybe you don't expect it coming through, but obviously all eyes are on Formula One drivers, all eyes are on the championship. So there's nowhere to hide. But I just feel like he's got the mentality, even when you hear him on the team radios now, he is the new Iceman, isn't he? He's just so cool and calm. I can't imagine him getting flustered.
But Tom, I think a huge moment really for Oscar and for this championship as a whole was when he went wheel to wheel with Max in Saudi and came out on top. But that was a huge feather in his cap and actually just adds to his threat to the established hierarchy of Formula One.
Well, Pinks, I think he proved that he's not intimidated by Max, but I don't think he went wheel to wheel with Max Verstappen in Saudi, actually. I mean, it all okay, for the first 5 seconds of the race, he proved he made a tremendous start. And then
it was a great start, but I mean, don't underestimate the importance of a start.
Yeah, but still, it was that penalty that took it away from Max. Max 2.8 seconds shy at the flag. Without that penalty, I think he might have won the race, actually. I think the Red Bull was incredibly quick last weekend. But you're right, Oscar Piastri isn't intimidated by anyone. We saw it at Baku last year when he had Charles Leclerc on his gearbox. He doesn't make mistakes. And actually, that's a nice segue into talking about Lando Norris, isn't it? He said on our show last week, I want to be perfect. And I think for any sports person to say, I want to be perfect is an unrealistic ambition, right?
Well, actually, by contrast, Oscar actually told us on Sky F1 there is no such thing as perfect. There's a relentless pursuit at improvement, but there will never be perfection. And maybe that's the difference. I mean, you say he hasn't made any mistakes. There was a mistake perhaps out of his control in Australia, which had much bigger consequences than the slight mistake that Lando made. Obviously, he tumbled down to 9th. Otherwise, he'd have been leading the championship sooner.
Oh, you're a harsh woman. I think you're a harsh woman, Pinks. I think to accuse Oscar of making a mistake, they both went off. They both hit that puddle at the same time.
He was a bit unlucky. All right. But the point is that he would have been leading sooner had that moment not happened. I think significantly, and Andrea Stella said it to us, that there's no noise, there's no fuss.
In his head.
He just is clinical. Yeah, he's clinical and you
can look at the Saudi race, as you say, TC, and you've got, Max getting the penalty, which definitely decided the race. But Oscar forced the penalty by executing the perfect start. And it's not many times a driver can beat Max off the line into turn 1 and then have the wherewithal to brake late to make sure Max can't go around the outside, but not make the mistake yourself and go off the road. So he just measured it perfectly, and that won him the race. And I just think this unflappable quality that we've seen from him, it gives him a bit of an edge at the moment, which is not what we've seen from Lando.
It's almost as if there's a naivety to Lando at the minute, in that the desire to be perfect, the desire to push the car further than it wants to go in quali. It's been a recurring problem, I think, for Lando. Every time Oscar's been quick in qualifying, you can go back to year 1, Lando was the guy making mistakes in Q3, running wide, track limits, that kind of thing. And it's not getting any easier for him. Whereas I think there are two things in Oscar's camp. One is the experience of Mark Webber cannot be overstated. Mark Webber, his manager, and just that quiet confidence that Webber brings him. But also, I've said this before on the show, and I'm going to say it again, he's got a new physio this year, Arthur, who is a Finn. He worked in the NFL before, and he's incredibly quiet, totally focused on Oscar, lives in the next door block of flats in Monaco to him, and he has had a hugely positive influence on Oscar as well. And I think those two things just are making him an irrepressible force this year. And Lando's got the speed. We all know that. We've seen it many times. But he's got to bounce back from the triple-header troubles that he's had immediately in Miami.
It's funny, actually, you've got to take Tom Stallard into the equation as well, who's equally unflappable and performed at the highest level of international sport, being an Olympic rower himself. I bumped into him at the airport after the race. I was like, yes, well done. And you go, yeah, boy done good. That was it. That was the celebration. And again, it's, I used to work in poker, and the Finns were actually the best poker players because they neither mourn defeat or celebrate victory. They just get on with it. And this seems to be very much the Piastri team mindset.
And the Norris team will see that as well, because, there's no better place to see than in the same team. So they'll see all of this going on, and the calm serenity around Oscar, which has just not been the case with Lando. And we know he's got the speed, but all of these little things, if it's, small Q3 errors, if it's track limits, and then a crash in Jeddah, and then it's the way that Lando's dealing with those as well in the media, and he's I feel like he's just bringing more pressure on himself. And I know he says that he doesn't mind that, and that's, it's his style, but I just look at it from the outside. I think you're making your own narratives here, which is adding more pressure to yourself rather than playing it cool and moving on to the next one. He's sort of dwelling on the mistakes more.
But I'm going to come to Lando's defence here, because I think Lando has always been this way. We're not going to change him. They've just got very different personalities. And it does work for Lando. Okay, yes, he might have made a handful more mistakes, and they've been significant ones, particularly that quali lap in Saudi was such a shame, because I really wanted to see him fighting at the front. But you saw a recovery drive from him. He bounced back incredibly well from the disappointment of Saturday to really perform on Sunday. And actually, I think he probably could and should have got on the podium, bar a great performance from Charles Leclerc. So let's not try and change Lando, because what he does is great. Whether it will be enough to overcome a very different approach from his teammate, time will tell.
I think this is the time where he's in a championship fight, though. And it's one thing when you've got the pressure off and you can, and he's been the plucky underdog for a long time. But he was the favourite coming in this year. And I just feel like the mentality, I know we, in the media side, we love drivers speaking their truths. So it's kind of a strange thing for me to say maybe he should be more guarded, because I would never want that from where I'm sitting right now. And it's great to see. But sometimes I watch the interviews that he's doing afterwards, and I just sort of wince slightly, because he's being so totally honest, and that is great and it's applaudable. But you just know that the headlines are going to be what he's saying, and he's giving everyone the nuggets to then build the narrative and the pressure on him, which seems tough.
Well, that narrative will inevitably build if he then doesn't win the race the next day. I do think it's endearing. I do think it's encouraging for young people to talk about their vulnerabilities. Seb Vettel said some great things about Lando. He said he's making it okay for kids everywhere to talk about any kind of mental struggles that they're having, and it's okay to be honest. But as you say, if he then doesn't take the checkered flag, the press, everyone, the fans around the world will use that against him. So I hope for his sake that he does triumph, because it shows that approach can work as well.
Pinks, you say, we're not going to change, or we shouldn't change Lando Norris. But I think he should look back through the history books and look at Nico Rosberg, who was always brilliantly fast, particularly over one lap. But up against Lewis Hamilton in the same car, he wasn't as quick, and he had to change something in order to win the World Championship. And he did in 2016. He changed his mindset, much more of a sort of battle-hardened war mentality that got under Lewis Hamilton's skin. And it's been well documented now that is what won him the championship. And it has to be said, a little bit more unreliability on Lewis's car, but still, Rosberg saw that he needed to change his approach in order to beat Hamilton in the same car. And I wonder whether Norris is going to have that watershed moment himself and change his moyen de guerre if he's going to beat Oscar.
Ooh, monsieur. I do think there was a level of intensity to Nico that we hadn't seen before in 2016. I mean, so much so that he prematurely retired from the sport. Yes, there were reliability issues for Lewis. There were some uncharacteristic mistakes as well. What I'm saying is we don't want a total overhaul of Lando's character, because we love Lando Norris and we love what he is able to do in a racing car. So let's just see how things play out. We've got still a long season ahead. Time will tell.
To be clear, I don't want an overhaul of Lando's character either. We don't want to change Lando the man. But I'm just talking about in these moments of, the adrenaline's coursing through your body. You've just realised that you've maybe blown a whole race weekend with a crash, or even an innocuous over track limits in Q3. And when you're doing a Q3 lap, these are the moments that decide the race at the moment with how it's going. You then jump out of the car, you go to the media pen, you're faced with, I don't know, a dozen questions about the same thing, about your mistake. And so I don't want to change his character. And it's up to Lando what happens. But I sometimes just taking a breath before you go in and just... There's bigger picture stuff here than... I'm not talking about Lando as a person and everything else that's happening, but just does he need to invite the pressure, or could he just have a bit of a think about it maybe before he goes into the pen? And if he doesn't, then that's fine. If that's his style, that's fine, and it's up to him.
There was something that happened in the China pre-race press conference with Lando when he came in and said, this car is incredibly difficult to drive. We need an overhaul of it. And he just won the Australian Grand Prix the previous weekend from pole position. And that kind of criticism goes right to the heart of a racing team. And I used the word naive to describe him earlier. This is kind of what I mean, in that don't air your dirty laundry in public. That's not a message that needs to be put out in the media, criticising the car publicly. By all means, talk to your engineers about it. Push really hard inside. But I really believe that goes to the core of the team. All it does is give, the momentum just swings the pendulum just swings just a tiny bit towards Oscar's side of the garage when you do things like that. And it's all about marginal gains. And if you add it all up, suddenly Oscar's going to end up with a big advantage, I think, if Lando doesn't change his approach in matters like that.
Well, you say things like that, and then you have, at some point, an upgrade package that goes on the car. And Lando's been very vocal about how he's not able to get the most out of the car and it doesn't suit his driving style. Oscar's very happy with it and is able to deliver. But we're talking, in the grand scheme, we're talking hundreds. And we're talking about being able to put your lap together in Q3 rather than not putting the lap together. So it's not like the raw pace, but it's about the consistency of being able to deliver that pace. So then at some point, McLaren have a decision to make, and these sort of things will play on the mind. And they'll be like, actually, Lando's not that comfortable in the car. Maybe we'll throw something more at Oscar. And it's a hypothetical situation for some point. But I do agree with you on that, TC. I think, especially that was in China. He just won the race. He'd driven a great qualifying lap and a great Grand Prix. He seemed to be, again, just too honest.
I wonder if you talk to Zach Brown, does he have a favoured child? And they always say you've got a favourite, right? What must Zach Brown be thinking right now, though? Because there's got to be part of him that has a feeling already that one has just got their nose in front and actually has to be backed by the team. This, for me, is the most fascinating management challenge any boss can face. How do you manage those two drivers going forward? Because actually, if you do put your weight behind Oscar, what is that going to do for Lando's confidence, particularly at a time when he needs a boost?
This week and coming into this race is actually huge because triple header, it obviously didn't go Lando's way, really. But when you're in the thick of a triple header as well, you've got long haul flights between Japan and Bahrain, and then a bit of a disappointment in Bahrain, and you're straight back to it in Jeddah, where actually it did look like Lando had turned the corner and was kind of quicker by tiny margins until the crash. But you never get a chance to catch your breath, really, and take a step back and think about it. But I still think Lando's got inherent pace that he can turn the tables on this and he can come back. But you feel he's got to get his feet back under the table and start to put the results on the board again now.
This episode is sponsored by Square, your all-in-one business partner, making your day-to-day easier. From point-of-sale systems and payments to inventory and customer tools, Square brings everything together in one simple platform so you can stay organised, sell anywhere, and keep things moving. If you're running a business, Square is great. I've seen their terminals and card machines in shops, market stalls, food trucks, even yoga studios use them. And Square lets you sell online as well as in person. It's built to move with your business as it grows. And as a customer, it's so easy. There's a cafe I go to every year in Miami which uses a Square terminal to take payments. The display makes it easy to check what I'm paying for. I just tap my card or my phone on the contactless reader and bang, I'm done. Square supports all major credit cards and payment methods, including contactless options like Apple Pay and Google Pay. Checkout is fast and easy, like a slick pit stop in a race. Square keeps up, so you don't have to slow down. Get everything you need to run and grow your business without any long-term commitments. And why wait? Right now, you can get up to $200 off Square hardware at square.com/go/F1Nation. That's Square, SQUARE.com/go/F1Nation. Run your business smarter with Square. Get started today. Let's bring Max Verstappen and Red Bull into the conversation now. Max just 12 points behind Oscar Piastri, who's leading the championship. Max just, gets better and better with every season. Norris even said after the race in Saudi that he thought Red Bull had the fastest car there. I think McLaren can't afford to think that it's an intra-team battle, this World Championship. I think Red Bull and Max Verstappen are a real factor in this now. Do you guys agree?
100%. Max is always in the title fight. I mean, in many ways, I think he's been revelling in this role of underdog. I think actually he's quite enjoying being the hunter rather than hunted for once. He's actually pulling out laps like he did in Japan and Saudi. Just astonishing. Against all the odds. Everyone's talking him down and then he just delivers absolute perfection. Although the one in Saudi, you have to say, Yuki, as the president of the Yuki Tsunoda fan club, he did give him a toe. Maybe just significant enough.
It was. But I like Max the underdog because I do. There were ridiculous odds for Max at the start of the season because everyone, got in their heads that this was a McLaren title fight, and that's all we've spoken about at the start of this show. But I completely agree. Max is showing what he's capable of, and he is getting Red Bull. They're just sniffing around every single race. Even in Melbourne, there was absolutely no right for him to be hounding down Lando at the end of that for a Grand Prix win, and yet he's there. Japan as well, to win that race, he didn't have the best car by a long shot. I mean, the McLaren should have had a comfortable 1-2 lockout on the grid, and yet he was there, and he managed to control it. And I think Max with Red Bull, the team nous, the strategy, the aggression that they put in, the Yuki toe, even before the Yuki toe in Jeddah, the fact that he got that extra run and they just fueled for 2 flying laps, it was really clever. And it was
smart from the pit wall, wasn't it?
And it gave Max that edge. And without that, I mean, George spoke about it afterwards and said, I think Mercedes, if we'd have done that, we might have been able to be right at the front as well. And I kind of agree. There was performance in there that driver and team extracted, and they're able to get more out of it. I think they're squeezing more out of the lemon than the other teams around. More out of the papaya.
That juicy papaya.
It was a great turnaround by Red Bull, wasn't it? When you think sort of everything that could have gone wrong did go wrong in Bahrain. The pit stops, the pace of the car, the tyre wear. And then a week later in Saudi, they're making, as you were saying, JP, amazing decisions on the pit wall in qualifying. The car was on point in the race, and they actually transformed it over the course of the weekend. I mean, McLaren were 1.2 seconds clear of the field in Friday practice, and yet come the race on Sunday, Max was going toe-to-toe. I thought Red Bull were extraordinary, actually. And it's interesting, since the Saudi Grand Prix, Christian Horner, team principal, has come out and said, look, we win and we lose together. And there was all that speculation leading into the Saudi race about where's Max going to drive next year. And I actually really feel that Max is committed. There is, of course, speculation, but I do think
Hang on, Helmut Marko started that speculation. All this talk about it being stirred up by the press. Helmut went on record to say he was worried that Max was going to leave. Yeah, I can't deny that, Pinks, but that wasn't Max Verstappen saying that, was it? I do think Max Verstappen is committed to Red Bull. I think there's a lot of noise around him at the moment and a lot of talk of performance clauses, and none of us three know what is written in his contract, other than it's, I think, like all Formula One contracts, I think the end of July is a key moment in terms of renewals. That's the case across the board. Do you think
he'll be at Red Bull next year? Do you think he'll have a sabbatical? I mean, if he wins the world title, I think he'll be in the car. Even if he's top 3, I think he'll be in the car next year. I don't think Max Verstappen is one of those people that walks away from a fight. There's nothing about him that makes me think he's not going to push to the limit.
So he's committed, and he's certainly committed at the moment, because I think no one wants to win like Max wants to win. I mean, he can win 19 out of 22 races, and he still wants to go to the finale, and he's desperate to put it on pole and win in Abu Dhabi a couple of years ago. He is just hungry for success at every opportunity. So it doesn't matter. You could chuck him in any car right now, and he would be committed to doing the best he possibly could on that weekend. But by the same token, I think if we get another 5 races into the season, I think it's kind of too early to tell. But Red Bull have done enough to obviously show that he can still win the championship this year. But if we get another 5 races down the line, I think the Barcelona one is a key race. And suddenly he thinks that actually the wheels are coming off a little bit, and he's just falling away, and there's a lot of change at Red Bull for next year. If he thinks that there's a chance that they're not going to be able to provide a race-winning machine, let alone a championship-winning machine, he is going to be looking elsewhere, I think, because he's just here to win. He's not here to make up the numbers at all. I think he'd rather walk away than make up the numbers. Okay,
so where is he going to end up next year if he's not in a Red Bull? What's actually available? I mean, okay, there is currently a seat at Mercedes. I thought it was interesting that James Vowles, who spent 20 years working at Mercedes, came out in Saudi and said, don't think he's the right fit for that team.
Yeah, I mean, Mercedes is so interesting, isn't it? Because things seem really harmonious at the team at the moment. I think they're slightly more competitive, bar Saudi, than they expected to be. I think Saudi was a disappointment, actually. I think George thought he would be challenging for the podium, if not the victory. If there was a couple of little mistakes, perhaps, because he was really kind of buoyed by that quali performance. But I just think that there's just a nice dynamic between the drivers. George has really kind of blossomed into that leadership role. Valtteri Bottas is there in the background supporting Kimi and giving him advice from all of his years' experience. And Toto seems really relaxed. I think that might change slightly if and when they become more competitive and they're battling it out potentially for a world title. But I don't know, if I was Toto Wolff, whether I'd want to disrupt that current environment, that sort of team dynamic. And then you look at Aston Martin, who were nowhere in Saudi and are having a really difficult season. Can you really see Max going to Aston Martin, even if it is for the astronomical figures that are being bandied about? And then potentially Ferrari? But, there's no obvious fit for him. So I was interested again in what Seb Vettel had to say at the weekend in Saudi. He was saying some very intelligent, wise words all weekend. And one other thing was he said he identified and related to what Max was going through, that although obviously he won a number of world titles with Red Bull, but when the chips are down, this is actually when you bond together most as a team. And it could be interesting to see, because I've always been blown away by how Max is able to compartmentalize and just take himself away from the noise and perform on track when the pressure is on. He could just be the glue that holds that whole team together and pulls them through this difficult patch. And I say difficult patch, he put it on pole and he was disappointed not to take the win at the weekend. It's not that difficult, is it?
Pink, he is the glue. He is the glue that's keeping that whole outfit together. You just walk into the Red Bull hospitality area. If he's there, there is an energy about the place. He's the driving force. I really believe he is. Well,
because they know that when he's there, anything can happen. Even when they're not the most competitive, he can still put it on pole and win a race. He's exceptional.
Teams are set up around Max in the way they were around Michael Schumacher. I see so many parallels between Schumacher and Max Verstappen. And I've said it before, I'm going to say it again now, but I do think if or when Max Verstappen leaves Red Bull, it's going to have a similar effect on that team as when Michael left Benetton in the mid-90s. It'll take the team a while to rebuild because it is such a massive hole to fill. But Pinks, your analysis of where Max could end up was interesting, because actually you talked, if you were managing him, you've talked him out of leaving Red Bull, really, because there's no obvious vacancy.
The problem is with Mercedes is the obvious choice, isn't it? And that has been. But I think George is doing too well. Kimi's so young, and they've kind of locked themselves in there. He's doing well enough that they can't get rid of him again within a year. And George is just, I think he's doing too well. He's stepped up well as team leader there. And I don't see that being an option with the way that Russell's going. So then you are looking at Aston Martin, and the lure of Aston Martin, it seems nonsense as we sit here. But Adrian Newey coming on board, who has had a great partnership with Max and Honda, and the new infrastructure they've got there as well, the wind tunnel that's now fully functional, and there's been a lot of investment there. And there's a new set of regulations coming. So kind of in theory, what's happening now on track, which is pretty terrible, won't be affecting next year, in theory. But I still think, I do kind of agree. You're Max and you look down and you see Fernando Alonso on 0 points after 5 races and you think, I don't know if even though the theory works out, I don't know if I back that as a decision. But
then when you see what McLaren did in the space of 18 months... kind of give hope to everyone,
well,
doesn't
that's the theory.
But
it could, as a Brawn, it could be a Brawn story, couldn't it?
Exactly, yeah.
But also, Fernando Alonso has a contract for 2026. Lance Stroll has a contract, well, for as long as he wants it. Yes. So there is no room at Aston Martin. And if you're going to suddenly pay off a Fernando Alonso, it becomes, with the numbers... 100 million a year and all this that's being bandied around, it becomes the most expensive driver
Small change
in
for
the
Lawrence
history.
Stroll, Tom.
History of the sport.
We've already seen that he'll stop at nothing. He's so ambitious. He's got deep pockets. He'll stop at nothing for success. Think about the amount that he's paying Adrian. But I'm so fascinated by what's going on there, because I really think if I was Lawrence, I'd be saying, come on, Adrian, just have a quick look at this car. Just have a quick look, try and get us ahead. And actually that might just be the lure and the what Max needs to see in order to come.
But do you think that Adrian Newey has gone to Aston to work with a 45-year-old Fernando Alonso and Lance Stroll? Do you think that's Adrian's... He's left the champions at Red Bull and he's going to go to Aston and work with a 45-year-old, one of the greats,
being
but
a bit
he's 45
ageist. You're being a bit
year.
ageist, mate.
No, but Jolyon makes a really good point. I think there was a romantic notion that he'd never worked with Fernando or Lewis before, so it would be nice. It would be a sort of fairy tale, if you like, to work with him. Whether he actually thinks he could win a world championship with him is another thing. But I do totally take your point that he wants to go, and there's still a big appetite with Adrian Newey for success. Who will he get that success with? Who is most likely to deliver that for him? Max Verstappen.
And also, if you're looking objectively at the 2 Aston drivers this year, Fernando Alonso isn't the weak link there. It's 5-0 in qualifying to Fernando. Okay, he hasn't scored a point yet. But back to your point,
I thought
Pinks,
Lance started the season quite well, in fairness to him.
Yes, he had a couple of points finishes.
Yeah.
He was buoyed, certainly. But that car is not going to score points on merit going forward, is it? It was half a second off.
Well, then all the more reason to give Lance a pat on the back. I don't think we do that enough.
But Pinks, back to your point, what do you do with an asset like Adrian Newey? The car was half a second slower in Saudi this year than it was last year. Do you just bring in Adrian? He's yet to appear at a race this year. Do you bring him in just to work with the engineers, try and find a way forward with this car? The team's thinking is no, because effectively, if you go to a race, that's a week out, and Adrian started late on the 26 car anyway. It would be a waste of his time when he should be focusing on 26. I believe that momentum is important, and that actually they can't carry on like this year, because even if Adrian does come up with a potential race-winning car next year, the team won't be ready to win with it, because they'll just be too rusty. They'll be too out of sorts. They're out of sorts. That is a team out of sorts.
You can't tread water for a whole year. You can't just say, let's just survive 25 and then enjoy 26. Because 26 isn't a given. And actually 25, we've still got a lot of races to go. I think that Adrian's presence within the team is enough to boost it. But if I worked at Aston Martin, I would love to see Adrian on the pit wall. I would love to see him just come along, looking around the car. That alone might be enough to boost morale. You just don't know. Is the car good enough? I certainly don't know. And can Adrian do anything about that in such a short space of time? Again, I don't know.
I think this season is going nowhere for them because the car has been developed and the rate of development has been horrible for the last 2 years. But the important thing is that they get the procedures right on the race team and they can execute good strategies, they can be reliable, they can run decent run plans and the rest of it. And I look at Ferrari when in 2022 they suddenly had the best car. There was a new set of regs. Charles Leclerc won 2 of the first 3 races, led the championship, and they had a great shot to try and fight for that championship. But the rest of the team was so unpolished. And it's a little bit back to your point, TC, the momentum. But when you look at what was going on there with Ferrari that year, they had really woeful strategies. The department was not in a position to win races regularly under intense race-leading pressure. The reliability was very fragile. And there was a lot that just was going away from them on races that they could have won. And the thing with when you're fighting for a championship, even races that you can't win, you need to be second or you need to be third. You can't afford to absolutely blow a race weekend. And that's what Ferrari did too much. So even procedurally, the Aston Martin stuff is important for this year. And Andy Cowell is now at the helm. And I think he's got to be really making sure that they can be championship fighting for next year when the regs are different and that they're not just getting sloppy as a team and becoming tail enders, because you can't change that overnight to taking on the big guns if the whole team has got sort of weary over a shoddy season.
JP, that's a great segue into talking about Ferrari, another team actually that's going to be really disappointed with how things have gone in 2025 so far. A wayward P4 in the Constructors' Championship, more than 100 points behind McLaren after 5 races. Okay, Charles got that 3rd place in Saudi. A brilliant drive. Actually, Charles Leclerc has been driving brilliantly, certainly over the triple header. Lewis, on the other hand, Lewis Hamilton, struggling in that car. And it doesn't seem like there's any light at the end of the tunnel either, which is very worrying for Lewis. Why is he struggling, JP? Put the racing driver slant on it.
I mean, he says he's just struggling to feel the limit of the grip of the car. He's struggling to find a balance, and he's just struggling to feel when the car is at its peak and not going over the either axle with understeer or oversteer. The interesting thing with Lewis is we saw a flash of the champ in him in that China sprint and the sprint quali, and that's just a sprint quali. Is basically it's a qualifying session, isn't it? It's how fast you can go in the end on a soft tyre. And when the car was working for him, he looked like the 7-time world champion Lewis Hamilton. Obviously, that car was then illegal for the race, as it turned out. But you know that's a floor wear thing, and you can raise that, and it will cost you a tiny bit of performance. But he basically had the car in a decent window. But he's just struggling to feel the grip in it at the moment, and struggling to feel where he can explore more potential out of it on the corner entries, the mid corner or the exit, your 3 phases, and it's all a big head scratcher for him right now. It doesn't feel that dissimilar to what was happening to him last year in the Mercedes, though, which is a similar thing. He'd be looking good 1 minute, and the next he'd just be scratching his head, wondering where the actual speed has gone. Yeah, I'd say the concern for Lewis is that the performance obviously isn't there apart from that sprint in China, and he doesn't understand now. He's had quite a lot of races to look at the data. He's working with the team, and actually he was the most downbeat he's been after Saudi, still not understanding how he can extract more from the car he's got.
And his teammate is
Rapid.
Quite a long way ahead, and for Lewis Hamilton, that is difficult to get your head around, isn't it? I mean, in Bahrain, Hamilton was it 0.6 off Charles Leclerc in quali? That's as big a gap as he's ever had with any teammate ever in his career. But credit where it's due, Leclerc is establishing himself as one of the great drivers, actually. This is amid the difficulties, Leclerc's reputation is growing as a result, I think.
Yeah, and it's interesting, isn't it? Because the focus and the media attention, the global spotlight has very much been on his teammate, Lewis Hamilton, and the McLaren team in terms of competitiveness. So in a way, it's been quite good for Charles just to be able to ply his trade quietly under the radar. And actually, when you reflect on his season, considering the performance hasn't been there weekend in, weekend out, he's done a great job.
But when you
perhaps he's enjoyed the pressure being off slightly.
When you look at his last season, he was phenomenal as well, though. He's been really able to string together consistent weekends, bar, the occasional major strategy gaffe or something that Ferrari's still done last year. But the consistency he's now operating under, and we've said for years how fast he is over one lap, but I think he's becoming a much more polished driver, that if he got that 2022 chance again, I think he would be a much more formidable challenger as well. And I think it has been overlooked because all the storylines have been about Lewis. But Charles has been really strong. And that drive in Jeddah was proof in the pudding, really. He was a long way ahead of Lewis and actually got that Ferrari car to a podium that they never thought they'd get at the start of the day.
So what do you do if you're Ferrari? Do you go, we're not going to win the Constructors' Championship, neither of our drivers is going to win the Drivers' Championship, let's put all our eggs in the 2026 basket? Is it too early for them to commit? Because Aston look like they're doing it. Williams have committed the wind tunnel to 26 now. Should Ferrari do the same?
I mean, pretty much, yeah. They're not going to win the Constructors' Championship, are they? They've lost too many results. The drivers are not going to be there. It's a momentum thing as well. With they're at the front end, they can still challenge for race wins, and these teams have got enough, I think, in the modern age to have an eye on 26, but also keep a race team that can do a good job in 25. And they're not miles away either. I mean, Charles was on the front row in Bahrain. They are on a good track for them, and there are a couple of them probably coming up. I still think they can challenge for certainly podiums again, but maybe even get towards a race win. I mean, they probably do in terms of a championship position. They want to be prioritising 26, definitely, and make the most of the best of a bad situation right now.
There's more to come from our preview of the Miami Grand Prix, but I just wanted to tell you about F1's other official podcasts that you can listen to this week. My guest on F1 Beyond the Grid is new Sauber team principal Jonathan Wheatley, who shares how excited he is for the Audi project in 2026 and tells some fascinating stories from his career about Michael Schumacher, Ayrton Senna and Max Verstappen. He's brilliant, and that's available on your podcast app from Wednesday, and you can watch our chat on the official F1 YouTube channel. And the latest episode of F1 Explains is with Alpine's Oliver Oakes. That's out now. A lot of drivers seem to have taken a step up this year. We've talked about Charles Leclerc already. We've talked about Oscar Piastri already. And I think another driver who deserves praise and credit is George Russell. Just how big a step has he taken in 25?
I think the impressive thing is that he's leading the team well, because the pressure's now more on him. Whereas the last few years at Mercedes, it's been Lewis's team. He's walked in and he's been the understudy, even if he ended up coming up trumps last year. When you actually look at the performance for George, he's done incredibly well this year, and he's, again, a little bit like Max. He's actually keeping himself in the mix just by being consistent and getting podiums and getting results out of a car that shouldn't be there. So you never know with this game, as we saw last year. Small tweak of performance, and suddenly Mercedes can be there, and George is in a position where he can mount an outside chance of a challenge. But actually, when I look through his results from last year, the last 4 races that he had last season, just to highlight how well he was already driving, were Brazil, where he led in the wet and the red flag completely derailed a chance of victory. Then they went to Vegas, where he won from pole. In Qatar, he was on pole and got done at the start and fell away a little bit. And then there was Abu Dhabi, which Mercedes weren't that competitive on. But it shows he was already driving to a really high level. But now the benchmark that was Lewis has gone. Antonelli's come in, which does put more pressure on George, which is where I think the impressive sort of step has come, because he's got no teammate to look over and see where to improve, to see what direction to go in. It's all on him now, for sure. And he's really delivering all the time.
I think he's really enjoying himself as well. He seems much more relaxed somehow. And I think you're right, Antonelli's a different type of pressure for him, but he's being a generous teammate. He publicly acknowledges how talented Kimi is, but he is just getting on with it. And I just love the energy that the team are giving off at the moment.
But it's a nice situation as well for a driver to be in. So he's a race winner. He's now got a teammate that's come in, and with a load of fanfare, Antonelli joins Formula One. But let's be honest, Kimi's not there at the moment. He may be a future champion, but he's still learning his trade. He's 18 years old. So you can be the magnanimous team leader if you're in the position that George is in, driving to a really high level. You can be relaxed. You can sort of take him under your wing. You can be that guy. And it makes the team kind of galvanised. If Kimi's getting closer, then maybe you'd see a slightly different George as well on the other side of the garage. But it's the nicest position to be in. You've got your teammate exactly where you want him.
George has shown that he's got that spare capacity as well. I just think of his P2 in Bahrain with all of the technical issues, electrical issues he was having in the second half of that race. And he was able to deal with it all so quietly and unflustered. I actually think that was his most impressive race of the year so far, because
100%.
The car didn't really deserve to finish P2, yet he brought it home.
Well, he held on ahead of Lando under pressure on the last lap only, and then you remember all the stuff that was going on with his car. It was incredibly impressive. I mean, he's a naturally very fast driver, but his spare capacity, and I love the way that he thinks during the race. He's a really intelligent driver, and I think that adds an extra couple of % to George's overall credentials, really. When you think also the race in Belgium last year, it was really strong. Winning that and then having the DQ was just pure unfortunate. But he called that from the cockpit, and that was spare capacity to think about doing something different that won him the race from like 5th. And he's done that already this year as well. It was China, I think, where it was going to a one-stop, and we heard him say is going to a one-stop, and they still pitted him very early and it worked out okay for him there. But I think the mental capacity for George is really high, which gives him an advantage.
On the topic of Antonelli, will he be disappointed that it's, if you include the sprint, 6-0 in qualifying in George's favour? Would he have hoped to be a little bit closer?
You're never going to be chuffed with it, are you? A 6-0. Yeah, I'd be disappointed. But I think...
But when even you come in your rookie year?
Yeah, even in your rookie year. I was 1-1 after 2 and then 5-1 after 6 as well. But I think because you always... Okay, racing drivers, as you guys well know, are unbelievably confident in their own abilities. So even as a rookie at age 18, he's come through the ranks, he's flown through, Mercedes have plumped for him. You still think by the time it hits you hit the ground, you maybe doesn't think he's going to beat George, but he'll be hoping that he's going to be there or thereabouts. He's about to stun the world. So to be 6-0, it's not like it's a terrible result for him, but you have to be a bit disappointed that you've not got one over George, I think.
For me, though, he can take such confidence from Australia. That drive, navigating those incredibly tough conditions. In your rookie year, your first race was really impressive to come back from the back. And I think he's a grown-up. I mean, he is only 18 and he only looks about 15, but he acts so maturely. He's like an old soul. He's very calm with the media, doesn't sort of get flustered or berate anyone. And yeah, he just gets on with it.
He's so good in wet conditions. So I think that speaks volume of natural talent as well, which we will see from him. And I think that Melbourne drive kind of gives him a few races grace as well as a rookie, doesn't it? Because we've seen the glimpse of the talent that's there.
And Japan, Jolyon, actually. I felt, he got the medium tyre to go really long into the race. He led it. He set the fastest lap, becoming the youngest driver ever to do that. The potential's there, and I do agree with Pinks, just in and out of the car, he is a superstar in the making. But there's always pressure in F1 to perform, isn't there? And as Toto is moving the chess pieces around, trying to work out what he does going forward with his driver lineup, he is going to be watching Antonelli very closely. Are we going to bring Max in? And if we do, is it Kimi that goes? Is it George that goes?
It's not going to be Max and George in the same team, is it? That's not going to happen, I don't think. Why
do you say that?
Can you imagine it? With the tension that they've had in the past, I know they play it down, but they're not the best of friends. They're two sort of A-list drivers. I don't think Toto's choosing that as a lineup. I think Kimi, so long as Kimi has to perform okay, but I think he is the nice second driver. That's, like you said, Japan was good. Actually, Bahrain wasn't bad either, but he got stuffed on strategy. So I think that's an okay bit. And then you've got a harmonious lead driver. For now, though, Jolyon, don't you think? I mean, Kimi could be a very different person next year. And actually, you've seen with Oscar, rookie year, really kept under the radar, didn't make a big song and a dance on social media, learned each circuit as he went to it, sorted out his tyre management issues, sorted out his qualifying deficit to Lando, and has come back bigger and stronger and better as a result. And I can see the same thing happening with Kimi. I think he's tucked in now, behind George, under his wing, as you say. But come next year, won't be a rookie anymore. He might be a very different type of teammate. That's the hope. That's what Mercedes are hoping. That's what we're hoping, because we see the talent that's there. And I think when you have that 1 year rapport already, I think they'll have the respect there, which to be honest, I see Lando and Oscar having as well, because it's not like they're suddenly pitted against each other as race winners. They're pitted against each other as rookie with the more experienced driver. And they've sort of grown together, haven't they? They've become race winners together.
Agreed. And I think they're fond of each other. When Lando crashed in quali, instinctively, Oscar's first response was, is he okay? Like within a heartbeat, that's the first thing. He came straight over team radio.
Pinks,
he didn't go, yes, that means I can put it on pole.
He might have thought
just
it.
A decent.
Yeah, he might have, but he didn't show it.
He's just a decent human being. I don't think that reflects on the relationship between the two of them.
I think they get on well.
The gloves,
I think they do.
They do, but the gloves haven't come off yet, have they? We haven't seen them have a wheel-to-wheel fight. The closest we've got to that was at Monza last year when Oscar went round the outside of Lando at the second chicane, and there was a bit of tension after the race, actually, when that happened. Why'd you do that? And that was a very clean move. It's going to get tasty between the McLaren guys. It has to. They're fighting for the world championship.
I'd hope so. I'd hope so. I want them to if they want it enough, then it's got to be. I don't want one of them to roll over and accept defeat. Yeah. One team we haven't yet spoken about, Williams, feels like a bit of a turnaround this year. They've got Carlos Sainz come in. They're now fifth. On merit in the Constructors' Championship, 5 points clear of Haas. Let's talk about Carlos, first of all, and the way he's settling into Williams. What kind of a job do you think he's done, JP? A professional job, I would describe it as. He looked really impressive in pre-season, but then obviously just found when he got to Melbourne, the first few races, he was still learning things. And he actually spoke to him in pre-season, and he said he needs to work out how to get the most out of this car. It's a different style of driving compared to the Ferrari. So, it was about getting his head around which areas to push, where to consolidate. And James Vowles also always said, we'll judge him after, give him a handful of races. And that's where we're at now. And he's there now, isn't he? He's 8th and 6th on the grid the last couple of times, actually ahead of Lewis as well, which is a bit of an awkward one for Ferrari. And I think he's a great driver. I think in the midfield, he's a brilliant racer, which will help Williams. And I like that they're getting rewarded at the moment for putting two really established pros in the car.
And the DRS train he navigated in Saudi to help Alex Albon, his teammate, get that 9th place.
He's another driver that has that extra capacity. I put him in the same bracket. The Singapore one was genius. And now he knows he's got that in his locker. And it helps Alex Albon, but it helps him as well. Because if Albon gets past, then he probably gets past. So you keep the friendly fire behind you.
I think something clicked in Saudi for them. I feel like it was a bit of a watershed moment for the team. And I feel that Carlos has really brought the best out in Alex as well. Alex hasn't really been tested and pushed by a teammate for some time now. And he's had something of a renaissance with his career since going to Williams, bedding in, making himself the team leader there, but then always out-qualifying and outperforming his teammate. And I think it's really healthy for his career that Carlos has come in and lifted him and made him more... I don't know, I've just seen a slightly different Alex this year. A bit more feisty, a bit more tenacious, a bit more rascal.
Bit more rascal.
Because the last couple of years, he's been, that affable George Russell style with a teammate that he's taken under his wing, and Logan Sargent's been nowhere near him. And I mean, it's very easy, even though he can still score points in the Williams the last couple of years, it's easy to not be 10 out of 10 in every single department. Then you get a race winner coming in, and he has definitely lifted his game as well, Alex. And I feel like even Franco Colapinto at the end of last year kind of unsettled him a little bit with the surprise pace that we saw from Franco. But we know what we're expecting from Carlos. Alex will know that very well over the winter, so he has doubled down on it. And again, another driver that's getting a lot out of it. And it's just a massive boost. It just shows you get two really competitive drivers in a midfield car with the field as close as it is now, and they make the difference, which as a driver, I like to see.
Well, let's bring it on to Miami. The Miami Grand Prix this weekend. Challenging circuit, 5.7 kilometres. We've got a 57-lap race on Sunday. We've got the sprint on Saturday. Who do you think it'll suit, Jolyon? I mean, Max was on pole last year. Ferrari qualified second and third. Lando got his first win in Formula One.
I actually don't think it's going to be that different to Jeddah in a way. It's a sort of temporary street-style circuit. It's fairly smooth. You've got some high speed for the first half of the lap, but then you do, unlike Jeddah, you've got some more low speed and the fiddly bit sort of 2/3 of the way around at the start of the final sector. So I think it maybe will be similar to Jeddah, but I'd expect Ferrari to be that little bit more competitive with some more low speed in there. And apart from that, it's the usual contenders. It's not a massive outlier from what we've had so far on the circuits, I don't think.
So usual contenders, you mean Max Verstappen, two McLarens, and maybe Charles Leclerc knocking on the door as well.
I think Leclerc as a wild card for. I think he can be back in the top three. I think they'll be closer than they were in Jeddah. I mean, Lewis is a massive unknown, and he's having his own struggles at the moment. So you have to say Charles. The McLarens are definitely going to be there. I see no reason that Max is going to disappear again. I think the first half of the lap will suit the Red Bull, the high speed. It'll be very, very good through there. The blend of corners, I mean, is good for McLaren. You put some fast corners on there, and Max will come to the fore. You put more slow corners on there, and Ferrari will find a bit more pace. You mix it up, and McLaren seem to be the one hitting the sweet spot in both.
I think Miami is an incredible race circuit to go to. It's very hot, so again, it will be similar to Saudi in that respect. Saudi was boiling. Even when it got dark, the temperature didn't seem to drop. It just felt closer and closer and hotter and hotter. And Miami's a very similar kind of humid, very hot race. And we've got some elevation changes in there as well. They know how to put on a show. They've had 6 Super Bowls and 2 Baseball World Series there. The Americans just do it bigger and better and brighter. And there's this kind of cultural melting pot, very vibrant, a real buzz about the place.
All right, I think it's time for some podium predictions. I mean,
oh, you love a podium prediction.
I do.
Don't
and do you know what?
How many of them? I'd be really interested, TC. How many of them have we actually got right?
All of them.
No,
I don't know. But it was really interesting hearing Jolyon's analysis of the track and which bit of the track is going to suit which car. But I also think you can bring in the driver in that. So if the best all-round package is going to be the McLaren, I actually think Oscar Piastri is going to be the guy, because it's through the slow corners that Lando has been struggling this year, and the second half of the lap I think will punish Lando a bit. And although Lando won the race last year, he'd be the first to admit that he benefited from the safety car, and actually the most impressive McLaren driver in that race was Oscar. He was leading it up until the shenanigans with Kevin Magnussen and Logan Sargent that brought out that safety car. So looks like I'm going first on the podium prediction, which I never like doing, but I'm going to put Oscar Piastri 1, Lando Norris 2, and Charles Leclerc 3. There you go. I've laid down a marker.
Okay, I'll pick it up then. So, well, actually, in my head, before you declared yours, I thought actually this is going to be the start of the redemption arc for Lando. I think he won last year. I actually think you're right with your synopsis of the race, but if you look at the race, Lando was extremely quick through the race as well. and that helped him win with the safety car. So I think the pace was there. I do think getting that final corner nailed, he's going to have sort of flashbacks to the China hairpin when it comes down to Q3 and getting the brake point and the low speed. But I think he can do it. So I'm going to go Lando ahead of Oscar. And then I was thinking Charles as well. Am I allowed to lock that in with a subtle tweak from the TC prediction?
It is what it is, Palmer. Pinks, what about you?
I'm going to go Lando, Max, Charles.
Okay.
I haven't even put Oscar
what
on
happens
the podium,
to Oscar?
which is ridiculous. I don't know. I hate predictions. I just do this deliberately to annoy TC.
You're the only person to put Max on the podium, Pinks.
Well,
they were quick last year.
He's got the bit between his teeth. He's just, I just think he's incredible. And I think he's so smart at leveraging the pressure and just channeling it for success. He's unbelievable.
And we rule out Max at our peril, to be clear as well.
Yeah.
Guys, what a brilliant chat. Thank you both very much for coming on the show. I feel that we've given a great analysis of the season so far. And it looks like a McLaren is going to win in Miami this weekend if you believe our podium predictions. But JP, thanks so much for your time.
Always a pleasure.
And Pinkle, thank you to you as well.
Thank you very much.
Unfortunately, we also have to talk about how F1 Nation Racing has performed in F1 Fantasy so far this season. We're on 581 points after 5 races, which leaves us in P 157,115th in the F1 Nation World Championship. Doesn't sound great, but there are over 200,000 teams, so I like to think we're in the midfield battle, around about Aston Martin level. I'll let you decide whether that's optimistic or delusional. Our team is currently made up of Oscar Piastri, Carlos Sainz, Ollie Behrman, Pierre Gasly and Isaac Hadjar, with McLaren and Racing Bulls as our constructors. So what are we going to do for Miami? Well, thankfully, Laura Winter, F1 TV's lead presenter and F1 Nation Racing's deputy team principal, has left me a voice note with some suggestions.
Hello Tom, hello F1 Nation. Great to be back on as deputy team principal of the F1 Fantasy team. So sprint weekends, typically you play your chips because there are more points on offer with the sprint race as well as, of course, the Grand Prix. So you could look at doing that. Looking at your team, I want to see with the budget you have whether you can get in 2 big constructors, because generally you score more points with 2 big constructors than you do individual drivers. So how about putting in McLaren as you've got, try and fit Mercedes in there, and then you may have to shuffle around your drivers. So look at getting one expensive top driver, a George Russell maybe, if you can, an Oscar Piastri, and then you'll have to see what budget you have left, depending on what drivers you can afford. So you may have to look at some of the rookies who are at the cheaper end of the F1 Fantasy budget. So look at your Jack Doohan, Isaac Hadjar, Bortoletto, even Liam Lawson, perhaps you could try. That is my advice for this weekend. If you do that, you may well have to play a bit of a chip in terms of how many transfers you've done. So look at the unlimited transfers chip for this week. That's my advice. Good luck, and we'll see how we get on in Miami.
Thank you, Laura, for some much needed advice, and we're going to take that on board and go with McLaren and Mercedes as our constructors. We'll stick with Oscar Piastri as our top driver, given the form he's in. And we'll go for some rookies, like Laura suggested. We've already got Hadjar, so we'll add Gabriel Bortoletto and Jack Doohan to the lineup. And then the only driver we can afford after that is Fernando Alonso, so fingers crossed he gets his first points of the season in Miami. Anything's possible on a sprint weekend. Thanks again to Laura, and remember, F1 Fantasy is free to play. Just go to f1.com or the official F1 app to create your team. You can compete against us and other listeners by joining our league. Just search for the F1 Nation World Championship 2025. And you can keep across the action this weekend via f1.com and the official F1 app. And in selected countries, you can watch all the racing on F1 TV, where Jolyon will be providing his expert analysis. That's it from us. Thank you very much for listening, and we will of course be back on Monday with our review of the Miami Grand Prix. F1 Nation is produced by Formula One and Audio Boom Studios.